The sleepers of the cave, Ashab al-Kahf. Imagine falling asleep in a cave and waking up to discover that more than 3 centuries have passed. The people you knew are gone. The city you remember has completely changed, and the world around you is no longer the same. This sounds impossible, but it is a remarkable story mentioned in the Quran. It is the story of the young believers known as Ashab al-Kahf, the companions of the cave, a story of faith, courage, patience, and the incredible power of Allah. Long ago, there was a group of young men who lived among a people who worshipped other than Allah. Their society followed beliefs that these young men knew were false. Despite being young, they possessed something incredibly powerful: strong faith in Allah. They refused to abandon their belief, even though standing against their society could put their lives in danger. Allah tells us that He strengthened their hearts when they stood up for the truth and declared that their Lord was the Lord of the heavens and the earth. As the pressure around them increased, these young believers realized that remaining among their people could threaten their faith. So they made a difficult decision. They left their homes, their families, and the life they knew, and they escaped to a cave. They did not know what the future held. They had no wealth or army to protect them. They had only their trust in Allah. Inside the cave, they turned to Allah and made a beautiful prayer, asking Him to grant them mercy and guidance in their difficult situation. Then something extraordinary happened. Allah caused them to fall into a deep sleep. The Quran tells us that they remained in that state for many years. Allah protected them while they slept, and the conditions around them were such that their bodies were preserved. Their dog also remained at the entrance of the cave, stretching out its foreleg. Anyone who saw them might have been frightened because they appeared as though they were awake, yet they were completely asleep. Years passed, then decades, and eventually centuries. The world outside continued to change. Generations were born and died. Cities changed. Rulers disappeared, and new generations took the place of the old. But inside that cave, the young believers remained exactly where Allah had placed them. They had no idea that hundreds of years were passing around them. Then, after 309 years, Allah awakened them. The young men opened their eyes and looked at one another. They had no idea how long they had been asleep. They asked each other how long they had remained in the cave. Some thought they had slept for a day, while others suggested part of a day. Eventually, they admitted that Allah knew best how long they had remained. They were hungry, so they decided to send one of their companions into the city with their silver coins to buy food. But when that young man entered the city, everything was different. The place he remembered was no longer the same. The people, buildings, and surroundings had changed completely. He approached someone to buy food and presented his old silver coins. But those coins immediately attracted attention because they were extremely old. The people realized that this was no ordinary traveler. His clothing, his appearance, and especially his ancient coins suggested that he belonged to a completely different time. News of the mysterious young man spread, and eventually people discovered the incredible truth about the companions of the cave. Allah had preserved these young believers for centuries and then awakened them as a sign for humanity. Their story demonstrated that Allah has complete power over time, life, death, and resurrection. If Allah could cause people to sleep for centuries and then bring them back to consciousness, then there is no doubt that He can resurrect every human being after death. But the story of Ashab al-Kahf is not only about a miraculous sleep. It is also a lesson about standing firm when your faith is being tested. These young men were not powerful kings or wealthy leaders. They were simply believers who chose Allah over the pressure of society. They were willing to leave behind everything familiar rather than surrender their faith. And because they trusted Allah, He gave them protection beyond anything they could have imagined. Their story also teaches us that Allah's plan can be completely different from what we expect. The young men entered the cave believing they were simply escaping danger. They could never have imagined that Allah would make their experience a sign for generations of believers to come. What looked like weakness became strength. What looked like isolation became protection. And what looked like the end of their story became one of the most powerful stories in the Quran. So, if you ever feel alone because you are trying to remain faithful to Allah, remember the companions of the cave. If you are facing pressure to abandon your principles, remember their courage. And if you are going through a situation that seems impossible, remember that Allah can open a path where you see no path at all. The story of Ashab al-Kahf reminds us that this worldly life is temporary, but Allah's power is everlasting. One day, every human being will leave this world, and every soul will be raised again. The sleepers of the cave were awakened after centuries, and their story became a reminder that resurrection is real. So hold firmly to your faith, trust Allah even when you cannot see the outcome, and never think that your sacrifice for His sake is forgotten. The companions of the cave disappeared from the world for 309 years, but Allah preserved their story forever. And when you choose Allah sincerely, you may never know how far the impact of your faith will reach.